Greetings, YouTube. Today, a video about mental health. Um, I was running a part at work the other day, and the part is a two-cavity mold. So it's a top cavity and a bottom cavity. It's a metal part. You put a metal insert into both cavities, hit the go button, mold closes up, machine injects rubber around the parts, mold opens, you pull the parts out, load them up again, hit the go button. So that's how the cycle actually runs. It takes 90 seconds. Once the parts are on the table after the machine is started up again, you spray them down with some with a lubricant, which is supposed to keep the parts from sticking together in the box. And then you tear off the trim manually with your hands, and then you do an inspection. Now, this particular job, as again, it's two cavities. The top cavity works really well, as it trims easily, and there is very little secondary work required when you get to the inspection section of the job. 10-15 seconds, that part's finished. The other part, however, is another story. That particular cavity in this mold has been damaged because people haven't put the metal insert in properly. And while the machine still makes good, the mold still makes good parts, because of the damage, the trim comes off very poorly. It takes a long time to trim it off. It's not clean and simple and fast. And there's lots of secondary cleanup when you're doing the inspection stage of the process, and it can take anywhere between 30 to 45 seconds on that part. And when you're cleaning it up, you use one of these. It's got a razor blade on it, and you essentially you're holding it like this, and you're cutting like this. You're cutting towards your thumb. I'm wearing a glove at the time. Cutting towards your thumb to cut off any excess material that's on the part, so that the part looks nice and clean and neat and tidy for the customer. Now, that second part, that bottom cavity, can be really tedious and frustrating. It takes a long time. By the time you're finished with that part, it's often that the machine is opening. You don't have a lot of extra time. The top cavity, you're lucky. You can look at that, boom, boom, there's nothing. It's going right on the stand, on the fixture to hold the parts. So you get lucky sometimes, and I have a few seconds left at the end of each cycle. Now, if they were both running correctly, I would have like 10 to 15 seconds of time, which would let me do things like make boxes and labels and put the boxes on pallets and check my rubber and check my inserts, make sure I have enough, and when I need more, I can put them up. And I can get all this stuff done while this cycle is running, so I'm not wasting time. Increases your production value, and that break at the end of each cycle makes you feel not so pressured. It doesn't happen on this part. So in the past, I would have taken a much different approach to that second bottom cavity part. Because I was lost to anxiety, it wouldn't just have frustrated me, because it still frustrates me. It would have become an absolute obsession. And not just the fact that I was feeling anxious knowing I had to do this part every cycle. That was part of the process. That was part of the anxiety. But I would internalize the part. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that instead of seeing each part coming out of the press as an individual piece, so I'm making parts 1 and 2, then 3 and 4, then 5 and 6, I'm looking at each successive part, of course, the day. My anxiety would project myself into the part and the part into me, so that I was looking at the same part every 90 seconds. So instead of seeing a part that required a bunch of extra trimming, because with my X-Acto knife here, I would be viewing it as the same part frustrating me intentionally. Why are you doing this to me? I just cleaned you 90 seconds later. Why are you doing this to me? I just cleaned you. And each time that happened, it was a hammer blow. Boom, 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 all night long. I work nights. Again and again and again, I would experience that sense that the machine and the world and every reality itself was intentionally doing this to me. My anxiety was intensely egocentric. It's how I expressed it. I'm sure that other people express it in other ways. But for me, it made me think things were being done to me intentionally. And that part was my enemy. Now we back up and we look at the same situation today. I had to run that same part, but I've run similar parts in the past in the sense that we have parts that don't run that well. A lot of the parts that I work on are small run, small volumes, and so a lot of them are old, very old. So a lot of these molds don't work the best. But we still sell them, so somebody has to make them. And I'm one of the people that does. But now, it's just a frustration. And each part's a different part. Every cycle is a different part. It's not the same part. And I spend the night kind of tweaking my method until I find the best way of doing it. Sometimes I think I've got something figured out, it wasn't quite right, and I fall back into something else and try that. And I realize that eventually that, yes, this is the best thing I can do right here. It's not perfect. It's not going to get me the slickest results every cycle, but it increases the chances of me getting the best results possible. And sometimes I have to modify what I'm doing depending on how tired I am or how much pain I'm in. Because there isn't any single day of the week that when I leave work, my hands don't hurt and my back doesn't hurt. I'm trimming with my hands almost all night long. I do use tools, but most of the work is done with your hands. Because they're the fastest thing, and it's designed that way. But still, they put wear and tear on your fingertips and your fingers, because you are trimming hot parts. In this case, I'm trimming hot parts. Some parts are cooled before you trim them. These parts have to be trimmed when they're hot. Otherwise, they don't trim very well at all. Even worse, even the good cavity trims like crap if you let it get cold. But it's just a job. It's outside of me. It doesn't have any impact on my emotional and mental state. It's just tiring. And every job is tiring. We all get fatigued. We all have a sense of I really want to go home at the end of the day. It's not unique to me. It is the experience that everyone in the factory and everyone that ever has a job experiences. Very few people have that sense of joy that they don't want to go home at the end of the day. They love their job so much that it's not a burden. And I realize the old trope is, if you love your job, you never work a day in your life. I found that to be bullshit. It's a nice idea, and I'm sure that there are people out there who have achieved that. Kudos to you. I'm happy for you, legitimately. This is just a job. This is what I do to make money. That's it. It's not my career. My career is becoming a better and healthier human being, one that is more sympathetic, more empathetic, and more compassionate to the world around me. And yes, I really do talk like this in real life, so it's not just the videos. That shift, that change between the way I used to be and the way I am now just became starkly obvious to me when I ran that part this week. I had to run 2 days in a row, which wasn't fun, but it was wonderful because I realized that the part was outside me. The part was on the table. And even though I was picking up my knife and doing the trimming and it's annoying, I put the new blade in here every probably 3 to 4 hours because the material just eats up the blades, man. It just dulls them like you would believe. And I would enjoy that sharp knife when it was new. And I figured out how to best get the knife to last. So I'd start with using the tip, and as the tip started to resist, then I moved down here, and then I finally cutting down here, so I could try to make the blade last as long as possible. Because I don't want to waste resources more than anybody else does. I actually don't have a knife sharpening fixture that'll do this. I have one but the angle's not quite right. I have to figure out how to do that someday. I don't know if I have the skill to make one, but maybe somebody does. I really need a knife sharpening system that'll let me do an angle that shallow. It's a razor. It's a razor's blade, essentially. It's very, very shallow, but that's neither here nor there. but that sense of freedom, that it's just clean, anxiety-free fatigue at the end of the day. That I can be smiling when my boss walks in. My boss walks in up to me and says, "How's it going?" I said, "Well, the drum these sucks." I'm not lying. I'm not angry. I'm not emotionally invested in that statement. It's just a statement of reality. And I've heard rumor they're going to have the machine, the mold repaired, which cost about $5,000. So that's not something they do lightly. So I'm really happy about that. It's a sign of growth. It's why I'm taking a month between my therapy sessions now instead of 2 weeks. In fact, between my last section and my next session, it's going to be 5 weeks. Because my therapist has some kind of a convention or something to go to. Workshop. That's what it is. Workshop. Sorry, workshop. And I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to get from session to session anymore. I'm going to the sessions and discussing things. I have my little 3x5 note card in my pocket. I keep notes on, and every session I've been to in the last few months has had fewer lines of stuff on it, because my therapist has helped me acquire the tools to handle the problems I encounter every day. All right, I've rambled enough. You get the point. My anxiety level is really low. I'm solving the problems I encounter on a daily basis. I'm able to put them into scope. And that's awesome. And I'm really comfortable using these. And I haven't cut myself or stabbed myself in ages. It still happens. And it's just my job. It's not me. That's rather liberating.